Bruce Fein is with us. He's constitutional scholar and attorney, Bruce Fein and Associates, Inc. He was the Deputy Attorney General under President Ronald Reagan. He is the author of Constitutional Peril, The Life and Death Struggle for Our Constitution and Democracy. His website is Bruce Fein. It's Fein law.com. And Bruce, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you in our radio studio here. And radio and TV studio. We're also simulcast on Free Speech TV, on Direct and Dish Network all across the country. So the Patriot Act versus the USA Freedom Act. We just, the USA Freedom Act, as it were, is now, well, what's the status of it? Where are we at with this?
The USA Freedom Act was signed by President Obama last evening, so it is now law.
Yeah.
Now, where the two are identical is that in neither case, after 9 years, has there been any showing that either program will do anything to diminish the risk of international terrorism. That, in other words, their encroachment on our privacy just for the sake of encroachment. 9 years is a long time to go without a single case of terrorism being thwarted. And the reason, in my judgment, why the precedent is so dangerous is that for the first time we've basically said that liberty and privacy is not the rule, and the government has to satisfy a serious threshold of need in order to encroach upon the privacy. We've said even the most speculative possibility of some utility at some future time is enough to encroach on our privacy. And if you think about how rapidly technology changes, it could easily lead in our lifetimes to the government deciding that surveillance drones will be out and taking pictures of us wherever we go, whatever time.
Apparently they already are.
Yeah, they may be doing that already.
Now it's up to 100 planes that the FBI apparently has.
So maybe it not be 100, maybe it will be permanent. And we know, Tom, this technology doesn't stay static, that there are going to be more ways in which the government may require your computers to have chips in them so that they can gather all sorts of information under the theory. It may be useful at some future time, maybe 10, 50 years, who knows?
Right.
Terrorism is too evil to take that risk. And again, once you're past the idea that liberty and privacy is the default and the government needs to satisfy some serious threshold of need, there's nothing that the government couldn't do to try to diminish what they say is a risk. For example, you have to build your home with glass so the police can see through it. Because, well, if you don't have anything to hide, what do you care?
Right.
So that it makes it really is.
Well, they've effectively done that with these infrared viewers where they can see through walls.
Even there, the court so far has said you need some kind of warrant in order to engage in that kind of exposure.
Unless you're flying an airplane over the top.
Over the top. Even there, the court right now, the current jurisprudence isn't clear as to how many feet above the house you have to be in airspace before you need a warrant. But I'm just saying that the precedent is so dangerous because it eliminates the requirement that the government demonstrate a serious need.
Right.
The government can always hypothesize anything.
Yeah, you are. I have so much respect for you, I have to say, and you are the kind of conservative my father was, the William F. Buckley, Dwight Eisenhower kind of conservative who actually holds the Constitution as, not sacred writ, but hey, there's important stuff here like the Fourth Amendment, and. Do you think that we've passed some kind of tipping point?
Well, it does seem to me that we have. I mean, just think of this, 9 years and gathering just staggering amounts of data, every single phone call, and still saying, well, it's urgent. We need to do it anyway because maybe somebody in a dream sometime, someplace may find it useful. That's not what the United States was made on. We take risks, Tom, that other countries don't because we care about liberty and privacy more than absolute security. You want to be absolutely secure? Stick everybody in prison. Everybody's capable of evil. And we were supposed to be different. The idea was captured in our opposition to writs of assistance, general search warrants, and it echoed the views of William Pitt the Elder. And if you have enough time there, let me repeat it. And this gives you the spirit of who we were as a people. And what he said to the British Parliament was, the poorest man in his cottage may bid defiance to all the forces of the crown. It may be frail, the roof may shake, the storms may enter, the winds may enter, the rains may enter, but the King of England cannot enter. all his forces dare not cross the threshold of the ruined tenement. That was our spirit. Can you imagine that today?
William Pitt, the founder.
William Pitt the Elder, yeah. And he was the voice of the American colonists there, protesting these writs of assistance, letting the British petty officers rummage through our homes and business.
Yeah.
And look at where we are today. I mean, even the slightest danger, shut down the entire city of Boston over the tragic bombings. No, we have more resilience than that. And yes, Tom, we do take risks. We have 17,000 homicides every single year. And we don't suspend habeas corpus and tell the FBI, just go break into any home you want, hoping you'll find somebody who could be a murderer.
Bruce Fein is with us for the rest of the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-536-2370.
We are also going to get back to this topic of the TPP and international trade. It's going to be fascinating. You're going to want to listen to this. In the studio with me, I'm very pleased and honored to have Bruce Fein, a constitutional scholar and attorney, head of Bruce Fein, Fein and Associates. He was the Deputy Attorney General under President Ronald Reagan. He is the author of the book Constitutional Peril, The Life and Death Struggle for Our Constitution and Democracy. And his website is brucefeinlaw.com. And Bruce, we were talking about this kind of Patriot Act 2, the USA Freedom Act. And you were telling me when we were off the air about a comment that Republican Senator Richard Burr made, the head of the Intelligence Committee. You want to finish your thought on that?
Well, what he stated yesterday in the Senate that Ed Snowden should be reviled as a traitor. Now, Senator Burr, who is head of the Intelligence, he wouldn't even be voting on the bill without Ed Snowden. Ed Snowden did his job, which was to oversee and disclose secret government. A totally tortured interpretation of Section 215, not just in the eyes of Ed Snowden. This is what the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, sitting in Manhattan, ground zero, said, this is outlandish. They
said it's illegal.
Illegal, outlandish, and illegal, both. Now, that would have never happened without Ed Snowden, who's being called a traitor by Richard Burr.
Yeah.
It shows, in my judgment, why what's worrisome here is we can't trust anymore on the Congress to oversee and hold accountable the intelligence community so we know they're staying within the law and they're not doing outlandish things that they're inclined to do when they know they'll never be exposed to the sunshine. For example, the likelihood is very great now, unless we get another Ed Snowden, that we will have our intelligence community share and coordinate with the British and the Germans and the French and the Canadians and the Australians to have them do our dirty work in the United States, share it with the NSA, and the NSA will then spy for the Germans and the British in their countries and then share it with their intelligence agencies. We know that's been true in a reverse sense, that in Germany, it's now been revealed that the NSA was giving the German intelligence agency search terms, so they could spy and gather information in Europe that was then handed over to the NSA. And that's, I'm sure, the tip of the iceberg. But it's
been globalized.
It's been globalized. You're exactly right. And it's going to be more globalized as technology and we become more and more seamless as in the digital age. And that's not even had any oversight at all by the Congress of the United States. And we can't secure our liberties on the fluke of Ed Snowden's coming around, once a century, at 29 years old. Yeah. And that's what makes most disturbing, that the sentiment in Congress still is, well, Ed Snowden's the bad guy. Said, no, you're the bad guys. And one of the reasons why I think they're so ferocious in condemning Mr. Snowden is because he exposed their dereliction of duty that made them mad. Yeah. Instead of saying, well, all right, we really did default and we should be exercising vastly more oversight so we have a rule of law rather than secret law.
Is there any move that you see that is consequential that people who are watching or listening could participate with or join to roll back this national security state to we all want security, right? We want police, we want spies. We're not crazy. On the other hand, within reasonable limits, like the Fourth Amendment, if you have a warrant, if you have reasonable, is there any movement to roll that back that's meaningful?
The answer is yes. There remained, I think, certainly a non-trivial number in Congress who are opposed to both bills and will continue to, Tom Massey being one, Justin Amos being another.
Yeah, it's basically the Tea Partiers and the Progressive Caucus.
Yeah, yes, it was absolutely right. And I want to underscore this, Tom, with regards to surveillance. Of course, we need to spy on foreigners, the enemy.
Yeah.
What was crazy about this program? They're spying on us. The target of the program is 320 million Americans. I can imagine if I'm Al Qaeda or ISIS, I'll say, that's great. The NSA is spying on 320. They're not spying on us.
Right.
I mean, this is really crazy. They would have celebrated. Al Qaeda and ISIS probably said, we don't want the Patriot Act to go away because then these 320 million distractions will eliminate, and them actually might spy on us, which they have authority to do.
Yeah, I'm sure, as you know, basically Osama bin Laden predicted that George Bush would react, or that we would react, America would react the way that we did to 9/11 by throwing away our liberties and throwing away trillions of dollars on a related topic.
Yeah.
Having to do with security. I don't know if you saw this blog today on Reuters, but Barry C. Lynn wrote this blog. He says, back in the 1990s, advocates of liberalizing U.S. trade with China said economic interdependence would inevitably lead to peaceful coexistence, right? The way that permanent normal trade relations with China was pitched and sold to us was, they'll become more democratic if they become more affluent. And then it goes on to say, today, the United States depends on China for myriad items that U.S. citizens need every day. These include 100% of key electronics and chemical components. They even include basic ingredients for some of the nation's most important drugs, including antibiotics. Given that supply chains often run on a just-in-time basis, in which goods are only produced as fast as they're consumed, we have no backup supplies. China, by contrast, depends on the United States for virtually nothing of vital importance, and for what it does import from us in quantity, like energy and metals, coal and metals, it holds large stockpiles. And the Chinese economy is now larger than the United States and growing fast. In the midst of this, we have this fast-track bill, Trade Promotion Authority, they're calling it, because everybody realizes fast-track is a bad phrase. People don't like it, that passed the Senate and is now going to the House. As a conservative, a constitutional conservative, your thoughts on a Trade Promotion Authority?
Well, I think it's defective constitutionally in a couple of respects. One, the Constitution assigns to the House alone autonomy over its own rules to govern its proceedings, Article 1, Section 5, and the Senate the same. A fast track, which is really the truth because it attempts to steamroller legislation through the House and the Senate, flouts that rule autonomy because it is a statute passed by the House and the Senate, signed by the president. And moreover, unlike ordinary House rules, they expire every 2 years. The House has to adopt new rules. This one extends for 6 years, and previous TPAs extended for 5 years. And moreover, the rules disrupt really the ability, the autonomy of a House to say, we need, in order to have mature, reflective deliberation, this kind of debate, this kind of time in hearings, this kind of opportunity to amend the bill. That's customary for any legislation. What Fast Track says is, nope, can't do any amendments at all. Really? It automatically goes to the executive decides which committees it goes to. It has to be reported out of committee in 45 days, whether it's 5,000 pages long or there are new issues that surface during those hearings. It has to go quickly to a floor vote within 15 days. And then it has the debate. I think it's like 40 minutes aside. I mean, this is ridiculous. You have bills that are thousands of pages long, very complex. And they're in their terminology and in the way in which they would alter the existing rules. And if you take the number of words in the bill, and divide it by that, it's like a nanosecond for each word. Right. So it is designed to compromise the deliberative process that we all recognize as part of what democracy is about. And it's based upon, I think, a quite illicit principle that the president knows best for all of us. And Congress is kind of an irritant, vexation out there.
Wait a minute.
And can't we sort of get rid of it? And they should just rubber stamp it, because if they amend what the president does, it calls into question his omniscience and infallibility. And just like you can't do that with the Pope, and I don't want to offend anyone's religion, well, the president is not the Pope. And no, in a democracy, the president can get it wrong. That's why we have separation of powers. So all these conceptual and goals of fast track are totally unconstitutional.
Well, not only that, Article 1 is the first among equals is Congress.
Yeah, and Congress is given express authority to regulate foreign commerce. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. It doesn't say anything about the president regulating foreign commerce. It says Congress shall. And now we're assuming, the president knows how to organize international trade and what's best for the country.
And here's where it gets really bizarre, is that it's not even the president who's negotiating this deal. I mean, it's being negotiated under his supervision. And it's going to, and this is going to extend not just through the Obama administration, but the next administration, which may well be Republican, who knows. But it is being negotiated apparently by about 600 transnational corporations in secret.
And their advisors, yeah. And moreover, Tom, something like this, as early understood, would be a treaty requiring a 2/3 vote in the Senate. And there's no way the president would get a 2/3 vote. The Jay Treaty was the first one. All these international trade agreements were treaties. And then suddenly they turn into non-treaties, even though their significance is far greater. They're more lengthy than ever were before. How did that come to be? It was just... when you turn into an empire, then all power migrates to the executive branch. And unfortunately, Congress has meekly surrendered that kind of discretion.
So one of your concerns is that we are becoming more of a kingdom than a democracy, essentially.
That is so true, Tom. If you examine the powers of the president today, compare them with King George III, whose powers we found so obnoxious we went to war against it to have a new country. The president's powers today dwarf what King George ever had.
You mean exceed?
They dwarf in their importance than what King George did. I mean, the powers of the president are vastly greater than what a king ever enjoyed.
Yeah.
And especially predator drones, he can kill anybody he wants. He goes to war on his own. He spends money in violation of appropriations bills. He decides what laws to execute or not. It's entirely secret as opposed to transparent government. It's truly stunning.
And this is not partisan. George W. Bush was doing these things. Barack Obama was doing these things. We have a problem in the United States.
It's a huge problem.
Okay, let's continue this conversation. Bruce Fein is with us. His website, brucefein, FEINlaw.com. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
And Bruce Fein's book is Constitutional Peril, The Life and Death Struggle for Our Constitution and Democracy. We'll be back. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann and Bruce Fein with you. Bruce, you were the deputy. If I can change the subject for just a second, then we can get back to trade when we rejoined with our commercial stations. You were the Deputy Attorney General under Reagan. And I don't think you and I have ever discussed this. What was that like? And what's, in reflection, what are your thoughts on that administration?
Well, I think the administration certainly was much more devoted to the idea of the rule of law. One of the things that you should remember about the administration when you did have the Iran-Contra issue, there wasn't the secrecy. You remember that they had the national security advisors were testifying. It was an open and transparent investigation.
Well, there were people being indicted. I mean, Ollie North and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. Ollie North, Cap Weinberger. Yeah. These are cabinet official
George
levels.
Herbert Walker Bush pardoned all of them, as I recall.
That wasn't Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, but that wasn't Ronald Reagan, yeah. And Reagan prosecuted banksters too. I mean, I hate to be defending Reagan. I make a living bashing Reagan, but it's a very different time.
It's a hugely different time. There was an ethos, I think, that, and there was a policy agendas, but it was to be open and transparent, and we wanted to engage in argument on the merits.
Yeah.
And there was kind of a thrill. Hey, people were brought in because I think they were knowledgeable. They had brains. I used to call them the band of brothers. And we put in serious efforts. We challenged a status quo in a lot of areas. You may disagree. We went to court with regard to busing issues and affirmative action and what we thought were excesses sometimes of the judiciary, sometimes of other branches of government. But what was thrilling about it was, I think, the seriousness of the endeavor.
Yeah.
People were brought in. They had deep commitment to the government and the philosophy of the Constitution. Now it's almost like it's a wallpaper, and people sort of laugh at you. Well, why are you so concerned about the Constitution?
It seems, though, the reason for that is in part because Ronald Reagan came out and said, government is not your friend, government is the enemy.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons.
There's a certain irony there. I mean, here you are saying we took government seriously, yet Reagan was campaigning on, let's destroy government, essentially. Destroy
I
is too
don't know
strong.
whether he said he said let's destroy government.
The nine most dangerous words in the English language are "I'm from the government, I'm here to help."
Yeah. Well, I understand, and the government grew larger under President Reagan. I want to suggest that it was an error-free tenure. I'm trying to suggest, however, that there was a seriousness of purpose and consistency and philosophy that enabled there to be debate now. But life's matters of degree. It's not that it goes out the window completely. But today, all of it is just partisanship and whatever.
How much of the toxicity of today's environment, we have just a little less than a minute, would you attribute to things like the Buckley decision that said that billionaires can buy politicians, or First National Bank versus Bilotti, that corporations can buy politicians in 76 and 77?
I don't know how much the partisanship is built on how much money, because, Tom, that goes into both parties.
No, I meant the cynicism.
Yeah, the cynicism. Well, yeah, the cynicism certainly is there. And if you're up, this is sort of a hidden secret. At present, and I'm not suggesting it's unique to this, that Speaker Boehner sort of sells committee chairmanships by saying, "Can you give $500,000 to the Republican national campaign?" And there's no embarrassment. It's just, it's on the block. Can you raise that amount of money?
We just had Bob Ney on. He's a former congressman, Republican congressman, and he said, there's a bunch of undecided Republicans on TPP, and they're all waiting to see how many hundreds of thousands Boehner will offer them. Amazing. Bruce Fein, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann and Bruce Fein with you. Bruce is a constitutional scholar and attorney, Bruce Fein Associates. He was the Deputy Attorney General under President Reagan. He's the author of Constitutional Peril, The Life and Death Struggle for Our Constitution and Democracy. Bruce Fein Law, FEINlaw.com is the website. And Bruce, back to the TPP. We are now in a position where if we were to get into a serious conflict with China, we have mutual defense agreements with both Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea, and China is building these islands, and they're getting into conflict with these countries. Where if China were to say to us, "Sorry, we're not going to ship any more computer RAM chips, any more computer processors to you. We're not going to ship any more phone parts to you. We can't build a cruise missile now without parts from China." How do we back out of this?
Well, number one, Tom, even with an effort to embargo, as we discovered after the Yom Kippur War, remember there's the Arab oil embargo. Well, we got it because through middlemen. We get out, we bribe people, and they'll sell us the stuff anyway. Hugo Chavez told us stuff. But with regard to China, what you say is rather odd in light of what the president has basically said. We need TPP not because it's really a good trade deal, but strategically it's a way to encircle China. Said, really? Now he's almost confessed. That's the real reason, because other China will write the rules if we don't.
Well, that was his quote. He said, if we don't write the rules of trade in the region, China will.
Yeah, but that doesn't say that. And he said that was for geostrategic purposes in order to solidify the Japanese. If the Japan comes in TPP, it's 12 nation now, South Korea. So he almost abandoned the argument that it was really good for our economy and said, but it's good to try to contain China. But trade's supposed to be for trade, We're supposed to have defenses for the purpose of containment. I think the whole thing is a mess with our relations with China. I think the TPP, again, to go with constitutional problems, another problem, its investor dispute mechanism has foreigners interpreting our law, imposing decrees that can be enforced in our courts, and yet they're not appointed by the president. They have no accountability to the United States, don't have to uphold the Constitution. There's no oversight. How do they get to enforce our laws?
We just saw this 2 weeks ago. The World Trade Organization came in and said it's illegal for you to have a law that meat has to be labeled as to its country of origin.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this particular unconstitutional element has occurred with WTO and NAFTA as well. Right. But by repetition, usurpations do not become legal. And oftentimes there are other reasons, technical, why issues don't get surfaced in court. One of them is because the people with all the money, the Chamber of Commerce, who want these deals to go through, they don't want to finance any of the litigation because they feel overall they're enriching themselves. And so why try to upset the apple cart?
Yeah. So if you were one of the people watching or listening to our program right now, and you were represented by a Republican, or particularly a conservative Republican, in the House of Representatives, and you were to call 202-225-3121 right now and ask for your member of Congress, what would you say?
Well, if I was there, you would need to oppose this because otherwise you'll be rejecting your constitutional oath. There are 3 or 4 constitutional problems with this, and not only with the fast track and the steamrollering of the process, but you're farming out to foreigners interpreting and enforcing U.S. laws. You're permitting something to go as a statute when it ought to be a treaty. Your oath is to uphold, not sabotage the Constitution. You need to vote against this until it comes back and it's done and turns square corners. Because process, Tom, the history of liberty is a history of procedural protections and safeguards against tyranny. Even if in the short run you want to try to do shortcuts because you like the end, it'll come back and haunt you. And that's what the message give. I don't want to sacrifice these constitutional cornerstones just because you might think it's a short-term game. If it's a good deal, you can do it consistent with the constitutional process.
Right. And if it's a good deal, you can do it out in the open.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be secret. Right.
Yeah, we've got 20. WikiLeaks today announced a $100,000 bounty for anybody who wants to leak the 26 missing chapters of the TPP.
Yeah.
And in fact, they've got me in the little video that they sent out to the world saying, anybody want $100,000? They're trying to crowdsource this, but we'll see where this goes. Do you think, Bob Ney again, when we were talking last hour, said that there's some Democrats who are on the fence. There's also some Republicans on the fence. And Boehner's not been able to whip the votes yet. But what happens if he does?
If he does, yes, for the audience, there's 2 going to be separate votes.
Right.
One is the TPA, which
just gives
is the fast track, which just sets the procedural protocols for handling it. Then what comes after is the actual Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is the agreement itself. I think that he needs 25 Democrats, President Obama does, or Boehner does, to get this through the House, given the
that's assuming he can get almost all the
Republicans.
Yeah.
That's right, because the Republican defections are still substantial. I think that there's at least a 50-50 chance that this thing will shipwreck because of the skepticism both from the progressive left as well as the conservative, the Tea Party people who are worried about the constitutional precedent.
Right. Yeah. But that's only going to happen. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's only going to happen if people call 202-225-3121, the switchboard for Congress, ask for their member of the House of Representatives, and say, no, don't vote on this thing.
Yeah, or send emails.
Don't vote in favor.
And I want to encourage, the listeners, because, a couple of years ago, when our listeners wrote in to members of Congress and said, we don't want another war in Syria, it didn't happen.
That's
Even
right.
though they're almost at the verge of sending 600 Tomahawk missiles and to begin the war. And when you out there in the audience said no by numbers of 100 to 1, I just talked to Congressman Tom Massey yesterday, and that's what he said his numbers were.
Wow.
The Congress said, okay, we're not going there. So don't think that your vote and voice doesn't count. It counted in wartime. It can count on this trade issue as long as you stand up and be counted.
Yeah. We saw the same thing with the FCC, Tom Wheeler changing his opinion on Title II for the Internet, too.
Yeah, the net neutrality issue.
Yeah, the net neutrality. Bruce Fein, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Bruce.